The only sound in the high desert was the crunch of Eli's boots on the frozen earth and the desperate rasp of the woman's breathing. He found her in the lee of the old mission wall, a discarded heap of misery half buried in the dirty snow. The town of Bitterroot slept on under a bruised pre-dawn sky, its windows dark, its conscience clean. Eli Thorne was the only one foolish enough to be abroad in this cold, his reason a private torment that drove him from his warm ranch house most nights. At first he thought it was a pile of rags. Then a patch of pale skin caught the faint starlight, and he saw the dark, angry welts on her cheek, the puffy slit of one eye, the way her arms curled around nothing in a phantom cradle. Her clothes were thin, worthless against the Montana winter. She was shivering so violently he feared her bones would break. He knelt, his big frame blocking the wind. "Ma'am?" Her one good eye flew open, wide with a terror so absolute it struck him like a physical blow. She flinched back, a raw animal sound tearing from her throat. "I'm not going to hurt you," Eli said, his voice a low rumble, the most gentle sound he knew how to make. He shrugged off his heavy shearling coat, the warmth of his own body steaming in the frigid air, and draped it over her. She stiffened at his touch, but the weight of the coat, the residual heat, seemed to momentarily still her tremors. "Where are your young'uns?" he asked, his gaze scanning the shadows. A woman this broken, left out in the cold. It spoke of a story with a cruel, familiar ending, a sob hitched in her chest. "Gone." The word was a ghost. He sold them. This morning. To the mining camp orphans train. Said 3 girls were a curse. A punishment from God for my weakness. Eli's blood turned to ice. The mining camp orphans train. It was a polite name for a human cattle car, taking unwanted children to a life of grime and toil. 3 girls. His own heart, a scarred-over ruin, gave a painful throb. He looked at her, the brutal evidence of her husband's displeasure, the utter desolation in her one visible eye. He saw the empty curve of her arms, and he made a decision as solid and unyielding as the mountains that ringed his ranch. He stood, his shadow engulfing her. "What's your name?" She looked up, confused. "Lena." "Lena," he repeated, the name feeling strange and new on his tongue. He reached down, not to strike, not to claim, but to offer a hand. A calloused, work-roughened hand that could break a horse or cradle a newborn lamb with equal care. "You're coming with me," her eye widened. "Mister, you don't understand. He'll come for me. He'll kill you." "Let him try," Eli said, his voice devoid of anger, filled only with a cold, terrifying certainty. "My truck's just down the lane. Can you walk?" She couldn't, not really. Her legs gave way the moment she tried. Without a word, Eli bent and scooped her into his arms. She was as light as a sparrow, all sharp bones and fragile spirit. She cried out once, a short, pained gasp, then went still, her face buried against the flannel of his shirt, as if his sheer solidity was the only anchor in a world that had shattered. He settled her into the passenger seat of his old Ford, the heater already blasting. As they pulled away from the mission wall, the first lights of the town were flickering on. Eli didn't look back. The 40-minute drive to the ranch was silent but for Lena's ragged breathing. She stared out at the unfolding landscape, the vast snow-blanketed pastures, the dark silent pines, the jagged peaks of the Bitterroots cutting into a sky now bleeding with the first hints of rose and gold. It was a world of terrifying scale, but also of a profound, clean silence, a world away from the cramped, violent shack she had called home. When he carried her into the ranch house, she expected Spartan bleakness. Instead, she found a home. A fire crackled in a great stone hearth, and the air smelled of coffee, wood smoke, and saddle soap. It was a masculine space, but a cared-for one, and everywhere there were ghosts. A small, hand-carved wooden horse sat on the mantel. A tiny, faded pink hair ribbon was tucked into the frame of a mirror. A watercolor painting of a bluebird, the lines clumsy and sweet, was pinned to the wall beside the kitchen door. Eli settled her on the worn leather sofa, heaping blankets over her, and set about making coffee. He moved with a quiet efficiency that was neither hurried nor slow. He brought her a steaming mug, his eyes the color of a winter sky lingering on her battered face. "The girls," he said, his voice low. "How old?" Lena's hands tightened around the warm mug. "Mari, she was 7. Then Alara, 5. The baby, Cora, just turned 1. A fresh tear traced a path through the dirt on her cheek. He said they were a drain, that a man needed sons. He blamed me. Eli was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. The flames danced in his weary eyes. "I had a daughter," he said, the words seeming to be pulled from a deep, dark well. "Clara," she had her mother's laugh. He gestured to the trinkets around the room. "My wife, Sarah. She died giving birth to the son I thought I wanted. The boy lived only a few hours. It was just me and Clara after that." Lena watched him, her pain momentarily eclipsed by his. "Where is she?" His broad shoulders slumped. "Fever 2 winters ago. She was 6. He finally looked at Lena, and the raw, unvarnished grief in his gaze was more profound than any physical blow she had ever endured. A man who throws away his children? A man who beats their mother for the crime of bringing life into this world? That's not a man. That's a monster, and you don't ever have to go back to him. He stood, the moment of vulnerability passing as he rebuilt his walls. "There's a room at the end of the hall. It was Clara's. You can sleep there. No one will find you. No one will hurt you here." He left her then, retreating to the kitchen to give her space. Lena sat, the warmth of the house and the coffee seeping into her frozen core. She looked at the little wooden horse, the faded ribbon. She saw the ghost of a little girl in this house and the ghost of a father's love that had nowhere to go. And for the first time since her daughters were torn from her arms, a tiny, fragile ember of something other than despair sparked to life in her chest. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was the simple, staggering realization that she was not the only one living in a world of ghosts. Weeks bled into a month, then 2. The harsh Montana winter reluctantly gave way to a muddy, tentative spring. Lena's bruises faded from lurid purple to a sickly yellow, then vanished altogether. The split lip healed, leaving only a faint silvery line. But the deeper wounds, the ones carved into her spirit, were slower to mend. Eli was a man of few words, but his actions were a constant, quiet poetry. He taught her to mend fences, her hands growing calloused beside his. She learned to bake bread in the old cast-iron stove, the warm, yeasty smell filling the house and chasing away some of the colder memories. They fell into a rhythm, a comfortable shared silence punctuated by necessary words about chores and the weather. He never touched her except by accident, and even then, he would pull back as if burned. He slept in his room off the kitchen, she in Clara's room, which she kept meticulously clean, as if the little girl might return at any moment. They were 2 solitary stars orbiting the same dark sun of grief. One evening, as a soft rain tapped against the windows, Lena was looking at the watercolor bluebird. "Clara painted this, didn't she?" Eli, mending a harness by the fire, looked up. A shadow crossed his face, but he nodded. "For her mother's birthday. The spring before the fever." "It's beautiful," Lena whispered. "She must have been a wonderful girl." "She was," he said, his voice thick. He set the harness down. "Lena, we need to talk about what's next. Your husband, Jed, he's been asking around in town. A man came by the south fence last week asking questions. A familiar cold dread seized her. The peace, the fragile safety of the ranch felt like it was cracking." "What did you tell him?" "Told him I hadn't seen any woman fitting your description," Eli said, his gaze steady. "But he's a dog with a bone. He won't stop. The law. In these parts, a man's wife is considered his property. They'd likely send you back." Tears welled in Lena's eyes. "I can't go back. I'd rather die." "I'm not letting that happen," Eli said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He stood and walked to an old wooden chest in the corner, one she had never seen him open. He lifted the lid and pulled out a heavy folded cloth. It was a deep, rich navy, embroidered with intricate patterns. He unfolded it, and Lena saw it was a woman's shawl, exquisitely made, of a style she'd never seen. "This was Sarah's," he said, his voice soft with reverence. "From the old country. Her grandmother made it." He brought it over to her and, with a tenderness that made her breath catch, draped it over her shoulders. The wool was surprisingly soft and warm. She told me once that in her village this was a symbol of protection, of a family's love wrapping around you. Lena pulled the shawl tight, the weight of it both physical and emotional, a profound comfort. It was in that moment, wrapped in the ghost of another woman's happiness, that she truly saw Eli Thorne. Not as her savior, but as a man, a good, lonely, heartbreakingly strong man, and the ember that had sparked in her chest months ago burst into flame. "Eli," she said, her voice trembling. He looked at her, and for the first time he didn't look away. The careful distance he had maintained collapsed. He saw the woman she had become, stronger, healed, her eyes no longer filled with terror, but with a light that mirrored the one he'd lost. He saw the curve of her mouth, the way Sarah's shawl looked as if it belonged on her shoulders. He took a step forward, then another, closing the space between them. He raised a hand, his fingers hovering just inches from her cheek. "Lena," he breathed, a prayer and a confession. And then he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a dam breaking. It was months of loneliness, of shared grief, of unspoken longing pouring out. It was the taste of salt tears and the promise of a future. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, their foreheads resting together. "I love you, Eli," Lena whispered, the words feeling more true than any she had ever spoken. A profound, devastating sorrow filled his eyes. He cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. "Oh, Lena, my beautiful, brave Lena, I love you too, more than my own life." He kissed her again, deeper this time, a kiss of possession and desperation. Then he slowly, gently pulled back. He held her gaze, his own filled with an agony so deep it seemed to swallow the room. "That's why you have to go," he said, his voice breaking. Lena stared, uncomprehending. "What, go? No!" "Eli, I just told you, I know what you told me," he interrupted, his voice raw. "And I meant what I said. But I've been a coward. There's something I haven't told you." "Something I did?" A cold knot tightened in her stomach. "What are you talking about?" He took a deep, shuddering breath, his shoulders slumping under an invisible, unbearable weight. "The day after I brought you here," he began, each word a struggle. "I went back to Bitterroot. I found Jed, drunk and bragging in the saloon about how he'd rid himself of his useless daughters and his barren wife." Lena felt the world tilt. "What did you do?" "I followed him out. We fought." Eli's jaw tightened. It wasn't much of a fight. He was a bully, not a fighter. He fell, hit his head on a hitching post. He finally met her eyes, his own filled with a haunted truth. "He died, Lena. Right there in the mud." Lena staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth. You killed him?" "It was an accident, but yes. I killed your husband." He said the words with a flat, final tone. "I buried him out in the high pasture where no one would ever find him. I told myself it was justice, that he deserved it for what he did to you, for what he did to your girls." A torrent of emotions, shock, horror, and a terrible, traitorous relief washed over her. He had avenged her. He had made her safe. But the cost. "Why are you telling me this now?" she cried. "Because I love you," he shouted, the sound raw and torn from his soul. "Don't you see? Every day you've been here, I've been living a lie. This love we have, it's built on a secret, on a sin. You can't build a life on that. You deserve a clean start, a life without a man who has blood on his hands." He walked to his desk, pulled out an envelope and pressed it into her hand. Inside was a thick stack of bills and a train ticket. The destination was a city 1,000 miles away. "The train leaves tomorrow morning," he said, his voice now hollow, emptied of everything. "There's enough money there to start over, to find a new life. A good one." Lena looked from the ticket to his face, a mask of self-imposed torment. He was sending her away to punish himself, to give her a purity of future he believed he had robbed her of by loving her. She stood there, clutching Sarah's shawl with one hand and the ticket to her freedom with the other. The man she loved had killed for her, had saved her, and was now breaking both their hearts to set her free. The twist of the knife was not in the murder, but in the devastating, heartbreaking nobility of his sacrifice. She looked at the ticket. Then slowly, deliberately, she tore it in half. Eli stared, stunned, as the two pieces fluttered to the floor. "You're a fool. Eli Thorne," Lena said, her voice trembling but clear. "You think our love is tainted by his blood? His blood is the only clean thing about this whole mess." She stepped forward, closing the distance he had created, and placed her hands on his chest, feeling the frantic beat of his heart. "You didn't just take me from that alley. You gave me a life. You gave me back my soul. My home isn't a place on a map. It's right here." She looked toward the window at the rolling pastures that held a dark secret. "You buried my past out there in the high pasture," she whispered, her voice dropping to a fierce, intimate murmur. "And that's where it will stay. My future is in this house, with you." Eli's composure finally shattered. A single ragged sob escaped him, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a world gone mad. He was crying great, heaving sobs that spoke of years of loneliness and guilt. She held him, her own tears wetting his shirt. The beautiful, terrible truth binding them together more powerfully than any simple, unblemished love ever could. Outside, the spring rain continued to fall, washing the world clean, while inside, two broken people held on to each other, choosing a complicated, painful, and unforgettable love over any other future.